think we're all set. Well, welcome to this afternoon's presentation. I'm Jeff Brown, Professor of Physics here at U of E. And before we get into, is this not working? It's on? Barely, okay. So before we get into today's talk, a couple announcements. First, we welcome you here and hope you come back tomorrow to watch the eclipse. We have two areas set aside for visitors to campus. If you're bringing your own lawn chair, which I recommend, something to sit in for the time leading up to the eclipse and afterward. The open area over here in the corner of Weinbach and Walnut, where Hughes Hall used to stand, I will be over there with a telescope and helping narrate what's going on. And if you didn't bring anything and would like to sit in the soccer stands, that's open as well. And Maria or I will be over there as well with telescopes and things to do. So we have two areas, the soccer stands north of Walnut, and then the open area just south of Walnut. Leading up to the eclipse, we have a lot of activities going on. We'll have food booths, music, dancing, games, and things for people to do leading up to it. Maria and I will be sort of narrating what's going on as the eclipse gets closer and closer to its 2 o'clock arrival here in Evansville. After the eclipse, traffic can be a problem. There's a whole lot of people downtown trying to get out. If you'd like to just stay around for a bit, Dr. Weber will also give a second lecture tomorrow afternoon after the eclipse at 4 o'clock. That'll be over in Cook Center, the Engineering Science Building, first building on your right coming in off Lincoln Avenue. That'll be at 4 o'clock in Cook Center 100 for a more detailed talk about what's going on inside the sun. So I would like to also give thanks to Paula Helt. Is she here? Paula, anyway, has been monumental in organizing and making sure things happen. So both this lecture and the activities tomorrow and everything leading up to it were largely the result of her efforts. And Aaron Lewis, who has also been involved in many of the activities as well. So I'd like to thank both of them. The photo you see on the screen up here is it's the Physics Club from 2006. In there you might recognize the person in front, that is Maria Weber. I put this up here because it's a remarkable group of students. In there you are looking at, I believe, last I counted, 6 PhDs, 1 MD degree, and 2 master's degrees among these students that you see here. All have gone on, and all of them have gone on to successful careers in whatever they've chosen. Maria herself graduated in 2008 with a degree in physics and in philosophy, a double major. Went on to Colorado State University for her PhD in physics, specifically in the physics of the sun. Went on to complete a 3-year postdoctoral appointment in the United Kingdom at the University of Exeter. Returned to this country for an NSF internship at the University of Chicago in the Adler Planetarium. And she is currently Assistant Professor of Physics and Director of the Wiley Planetarium at Delta State University. So her talk today will be on eclipses and magnetism. And with that, please help me welcome Dr. Maria Weber.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I grew up in Dale, Indiana, so I am a local girl, and being able to study the sun and being able to come back here to experience the eclipse in the area where I grew up is such a cool thing, and I've been looking forward to that ever since I stepped my first foot at a solar observatory. So this is all really special to me. So I'm matching the sun today. Yes, this is an image of the sun. You might not have seen the sun this way before. This is the sun today, this morning. But we're looking at a wavelength of light that's ultraviolet light, just beyond purple. Our human eyes can't see it, so us astronomers play a little trick on you, and then we give it a color to make it look fun and exciting. So this one in particular is showing us parts of the sun that are glowing in ultraviolet light, and it's also showing us these loops of magnetic field that are extended above the sun's surface. There's our Earth to scale, just to give you an idea. And so today I want to talk a little bit about, yes, eclipses, magnetism, but kind of all from the vein of the secrets that are going on inside and with our sun that we just don't think about on a daily basis. So this was the sun today. If you were to take your eclipse glasses and look up at the sun with your eclipse glasses, maybe we magnify it a little bit. This is something on the sun that we call a sunspot. And a sunspot is about the size of Earth here. But this image was taken with this telescope here called the Solar Dynamics Observatory. So this is our sun today. It won't be too much different tomorrow. We've got that nice little spot. So my question is, okay, get a good look at that. Do you think that's ordinary or extraordinary? Raise your hand if you're like, that's all right. It's kind of ordinary. I won't be offended with your answer. Cool, and then if you're like, wow, that's pretty cool, extraordinary. Okay, cool, so we're about 50-50, so hopefully by the end of today, I will be getting you feeling like the sun is extraordinary. All right, so I wanna first talk about this beautiful cosmic coincidence that is happening for us tomorrow. Okay, so I'm sure that we're all familiar with the idea that a solar eclipse happens when the moon passes directly between us and the sun. So here we've got the sun, and then the Earth, and then the moon right there, our moon taking its little orbit around the Earth. So what we are looking to see, the goal on eclipse day, is to see the moon completely blocking the sun so we can see the sun's wispy outer atmosphere, the corona. And so that is our ultimate goal and why we care so much about being in the path of totality. All right, so when we've got the sun shining onto the moon, the sun will be illuminating the side of the moon that's facing away from us. So the moon will be casting a shadow onto the Earth. So this is what that shadow onto the Earth looks like. Now, the middle part of that shadow is called the umbra. That's the dark region where no stray light's getting in. And then the edge is called the penumbra. It's a little bit lighter. We've got some stray light coming in through that part of the shadow. If you are right in the umbra, you get totality. So we're going to be in the umbra. If you are in the penumbra, you get a partial eclipse. So my university is where I'm currently working is Delta State University in Mississippi. Mississippi is going to get a partial eclipse because, unfortunately, they are in the penumbra for this eclipse. Okay. So this is what a solar eclipse looks like from space. Imagine you were on the International Space Station. During an eclipse, you look down on Earth. So this dark patch in the middle, that's our umbra. That's the center of that shadow. We're going to be inside that tomorrow. And then the outer ring, that sort of lighter shadow, that's the penumbra. Okay, so this cosmic coincidence, it just sends chills down my spine to think about it. In order for the eclipse to happen, the total perfect eclipse to happen, the moon and the sun have to be the same size in our sky. So I'm going to think about some ratios here. If I take the diameter of our sun, divide that by the distance from Earth to the sun, that number is the same as if I take the diameter of the moon and divide it by the distance of the moon away from Earth. Now I'm going to rearrange that slightly. Let's take a look at it this way. What if I take the diameter of the sun and I divide it by the diameter of the moon? 1,400,000 kilometers, divide by 3,480 kilometers, you get a number that's approximately 400. Now, if I take the distance of the sun to the Earth, or let's say distance of the sun from the Earth, Divide that by the distance of the moon from the Earth, 150 million kilometers, over 384,000 kilometers, I also get 400. So we have this beautiful, perfect ratio. Our moon is 400 times smaller than our sun. But our sun is 400 times farther away from us than the moon is. That is what allows us to have those perfect solar eclipses here on Earth. It doesn't matter that that number's 400. That number could be 384. It could be 2. It could be 84. But what matters is that those ratios are the same. There is no other place in our solar system, even though we have more than 140 moons in our solar system, there's no other place where the ratio of the size of your moon to the sun in the sky are the same. So that's what's the cosmic coincidence here. So I want to tell you about the 3 different types of eclipses. We've got partial, total, and annular eclipses. Now, the partial eclipse is where the moon just clips in and covers just a part of the sun. An annular eclipse, that's the eclipse that happened in October of the past year. An annular eclipse happens when the moon is just a little bit too far away from us. The moon doesn't orbit the Earth in a perfect circle. It orbits the Earth in an ellipse, so an oval. So sometimes that moon is just a little bit too far away. It makes it smaller in the sky compared to the sun. So when that happens, we get an annular eclipse, where we get to see this, what we call annulus of the sun around the edge. So in physics and math, we think about this ring shape here. We call that an annulus. So that's why it's called an annular eclipse. But this is what we are trying to see on eclipse day. Our moon completely blocking out all of the light coming from the sun's disk to allow us to see, for us, for a brief 3 minutes and 2 seconds, the sun's corona with our naked eye. So the corona of the sun here, the corona is a word that means, it's Latin for crown, also Spanish for crown. Now, the corona is the sun's outermost atmosphere. It's thousands of times fainter than the light coming from the center of the sun. So on a normal day, we can't see it with our naked eye. The only time we get to see it is during an eclipse. So when us solar physicists want to study it, the only time we really get a good look still is when we have a solar eclipse. So that's why it's really special for us solar physicists too. Okay. So again, to recap, we've got this perfect ratio. Our moon 400 times smaller than our sun, and our sun 400 times farther away from us than the moon. Okay. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, maybe you know that our moon takes about 27 days to orbit the Earth. So why don't we have a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse, every 27 days? Well, the reason is because our moon does not actually orbit the Earth in a perfect flat plane. The moon's orbit is tilted with respect to the Earth, and also because the moon orbits in an ellipse. Sometimes it's a little bit closer, sometimes it's a little bit farther away. So you have to wait for special circumstances to align our cosmic coincidence in order to get these total eclipses. Somewhere on the globe, a total eclipse is going to happen about once every 18 months. But in order to have an eclipse in your home location, that's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Okay. Now, just to prove to you that, in fact, eclipses happen on other planets in our solar system, but they aren't perfect total eclipses like what we get to have. This is an image of an eclipse taking place on Mars. Mars has 2 moons. Those moons are called Phobos and Deimos. And this is an image taken by the spacecraft Curiosity of the moon Phobos passing in front of the sun from the surface of Mars. Now, Curiosity here, it's a rover on Mars about the size of a golf cart. Curiosity has a little selfie stick, so it can hold out its selfie stick and take a picture of it. So there weren't Martians that were taking pictures, it was taking a picture of itself. And then it can turn that up to look up at the sky. Now, you're probably wondering, like, okay, I get that it's smaller compared to the sun. It can't be a perfect total eclipse. But Mars's moons are weird shaped. I tell my astronomy students that they're potato shaped. But here, the reason why those moons look like that is because they are captured asteroids from the asteroid belt. Mars doesn't have perfectly circular moons. So for that reason also, we'll never be able to have perfect solar eclipses. Okay, so another image of what we're trying to capture on eclipse day. This is what the solar eclipse looked like in the United States in 2017, the total eclipse. So who saw the 2017 one? Oh, yay, so many of you, yay. So we've got eclipsophiles here, all right. Good, we're in good company then. So this beautiful images taken by Miloslav Druckmüller. And if you're looking for like the best solar eclipse image, he takes pictures every eclipse, and puts them up on his website. And these are just so beautiful. We've got the moon here in front of the sun, and then you have the corona. That's our crown of atmosphere, or our crown of magnetism. The shape of the corona is determined by, the shape of this crown is determined by magnetic fields. So everything that you see here, these streaks coming out up here, these kind of loops or long, pointy, I don't know, maybe we could call them petals here, those are all arches of magnetic field. And the atmosphere from the sun, some of the particles in the sun's atmosphere become attracted to those loops of magnetism, and they get stuck there and they glow. And then we can see those on eclipse day with our naked eye. So that's pretty cool. The shape is going to look different every time. This was the shape in 2017. I'll show you what we think it's going to look like this year, but we'll have to wait until tomorrow to actually find out. But it's going to look much different, our corona this year, than the one in 2017. It will get so dark outside that stars will become visible. So keep an eye out for that too. So here's our path of eclipses across the world. I think the earliest one on here was in 2009. All those blue paths are eclipse paths, total eclipses. And then the last one on here, I think, is in maybe 2035 over here. Okay, but I'll focus just on North America. So we had that one in 2017. We're having this one right now in 2024. Let's see, the next eclipse on Earth is going to happen in 2026. Oh, very good. It's way up here. It goes through Iceland and also goes through Spain and Portugal. So I know where I'm going next August. As solar physicists, obviously, we get to have trips to go visit the eclipses. So whenever we have a solar physics conference, every time we have a solar physics conference, every time there is an eclipse. And so I can bet that we're going to be having an international conference there coinciding with the eclipse. So I got to renew my passport. I can take that trip. But it'll be happening in August in Spain and Portugal. What couldn't be a better time to see it. This is our path for the eclipse tomorrow. It's going to come down here through Texas, cross over Dallas. It's going to go through parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, and then us here in Little Evansville, Indianapolis, Ohio, and then through New York, Vermont, and Maine, and exit out up through Canada. Now, another reason why we should get excited about tomorrow's eclipse. Indiana last saw a total eclipse in 1869. After this one, tomorrow, the next total eclipse in Indiana will be in 2099. So, yes, these are once-in-a-lifetime events to happen in your home state, once-in-a-lifetime events for sure to happen in the place where you grew up. So, yay. Now, if I take a look here, these are eclipse paths across North America. This was the 2017 path. Here's our 2024 path. The next one that goes through the United States is in 2044, and it passes through Montana and North Dakota. Now, the one in 2045, actually passes through the location where I am in Mississippi here. So that's pretty cool for me. But then we get a few more, 2052, 2078, 2079. So, and that's our 2099. So I say parts of Indiana is only getting this little chunk of Indiana, and it's completely missing Chicago. So super cosmic coincidence for us. Okay, so we talked about this cosmic coincidence. We've got to have perfect ratios of the sizes of the moon and the sun and the sky. But I want to talk a little bit more about the eclipse than just this cosmic alignment that we're going to have. So to help you kind of plan your day tomorrow, the eclipse will begin. This is just for Evansville, for our location here. The eclipse begins at 12:45 p.m. Our maximum coverage, our maximum totality happens at 2:04, and our eclipse will end at 3:20. So the whole thing from start to finish, 2 hours and 35 minutes. And totality will last, well, this one says 3 minutes and 3 seconds. I've seen 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Some of these calculations, let's say, we know them pretty accurately, but like plus or minus a second for the things I'm saying here. That's still really good. Okay, now during the eclipse tomorrow, I want you to investigate your environment. Pay attention to what's happening around you. And this QR code, if you guys have a phone that operates with QR codes, will take you directly to my favorite website to use for eclipses. It's called timeanddate.com. It'll pop up the information for Evansville. But if you're not going to be in Evansville for the eclipse tomorrow, you can put in your town where you're going to be. And if you scroll down a little bit further, there's a little toggle button you can say, I think this says like details or more details, and then it will tell you all of this information that I'm going to share with you here. Okay, so I'm not going to read all those bullet points. I know there's a lot, but our moon will take its first bite at 12:47. Then we're going to start noticing the temperature will begin to drop. We're going to start noticing that the shadows are going to begin to change. About an hour later, our sky will be noticeably darker. The street lights will come on. It will feel like it's nighttime outside. At around an hour later, the atmospheric conditions will really start to change. And even if it happens to be a little bit cloudy tomorrow, even if we've got 50% clouds, something that does happen is because we're decreasing the amount of energy that we're getting to the sun by the moon passing in front of the sun, that some of those clouds might actually start to dissolve a little bit, and that's going to help us. At least we can hope that that will happen, but it does happen. It is a documented effect. So that could happen for us as well. And then about 15 minutes before the totality, colors will start to turn gray as we approach night in the day. Animals and plants are going to start being affected. You might notice that the birds will start maybe chirping and doing their nighttime rituals. If there are bugs around, we might start hearing them making nighttime noises. And animals, if there are animals nearby, they might start behaving unusually as well. But that's definitely something that I've noticed before during eclipses. And right around 1:57, we are going to you can actually see that shadow that I was talking about, the moon shadow on the earth. If you're really noticing it and it's a clear day, you can see that shadow approaching you, kind of like how a thunderstorm approaches you. That's a really cool thing. I've never noticed it myself, probably because I didn't know to look for it. But that's something that you might notice if you look off toward the west. Okay, so then we get to the main event. At 2:02 p.m., our corona appears. The moon is now finally blocking the sun. This is a prediction of what our corona is supposed to look like on Corona Day, on Eclipse Day. Might also Corona Day, sure, on Eclipse Day. And This is a true scientific calculation. It's performed by some solar physicists at a group called Predictive Sciences Institute. And every time there's an eclipse, they try to predict what it will look like. So this prediction was made about a week in advance. But what they do is they use a whole bank of supercomputers. They feed in information that we already know from observations of what the sun is doing. And then it churns out a prediction, kind of like how we churn out predictions of weather. So, the weather's hit or miss sometimes, but we think we're getting pretty good at this prediction thing for the sun. So you can expect that there are going to be a lot of magnetic fields, a pretty filled out corona all around the sun. So maybe take a mental note of what this looks like. See what you can see with your eyes on eclipse day, but we're thinking it's going to look something kind of like this. It's a little bit different than the eclipse we saw in 2017, more complex. Okay, now, right at the beginning of the eclipse, there are two features that we can notice. And one of those features is called the diamond ring effect. And shortly after that, you'll see something called Bailey's beads, if you're really paying attention, if you've got a sharp eye. The diamond ring effect happens right as the last tiny little bit of the sunlight on the edge gets covered up by the moon. This is the last little nugget of light that isn't yet covered up by the moon. And you can see that poking out, and it kind of looks like a diamond ring. And then Bailey's beads. We can see these sort of little illuminated, I don't know, I guess I'll also say the word nugget on the side of the moon here. But what that is caused by is the fact that, well, our moon is pretty perfectly spherical, but it's got craters. So what's happening here is that you're seeing the light from the sun kind of skim across some of those craters, and you're seeing that effect here. Okay, so those are going to happen in the brief few seconds right before absolute totality. And then at 2 o'clock and 2 minutes and 38 seconds to 2 o'clock, 5 minutes and 41 seconds, we can take off our eclipse glasses to observe the sun with our naked eye. Okay. Now, I would say, if you wait just a few seconds after 2:02 and then you put them on just a few seconds after 2:05, you'll be fine to observe this with your naked eye. So, again, for totality, we want to see the corona with our naked eye. This was what the sun's corona looked like in 1980. So the prediction that I showed you for the one that's coming up actually doesn't look too much different from this one, I think. And what I'm hoping to see, I've never seen before, is the chromosphere. The chromosphere is a layer of the sun right above its atmosphere, and it was only visible to the naked eye during a solar eclipse. Chromosphere is called the chromosphere because it flashes this bright, rosy red color during an eclipse, so chromo meaning color. And what this is light of a red color that is very, very visible during a solar eclipse. And I have not seen that yet with my naked eye. We can see it in telescope images sometimes, but I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing that on eclipse day. All right, and then it all happens in reverse. Yeah. So we started at 12:45, we make our way to totality, and then everything I mentioned will happen in reverse as the moon moves off and exits at 3:20 p.m. Okay, now I just want to let you guys know that all hope is not lost if it happens to be cloudy on eclipse day. Because I've seen some eclipses through the clouds, and it's still a pretty cool thing. I saw this one in England in 2015. This is not my picture, but this is people looking up at a solar eclipse from Stonehenge in England in 2015 through a really thick layer of clouds. But when that happens, you don't need to wear your eclipse glasses to see the sun actually, because the clouds are obscuring it for you. But then you can see that effect happening through the clouds too. And that's a different sort of experience than seeing totality, but it is still something that you could look forward to, even if you did happen to end up somewhere that's got cloudy skies. And when observing the sun, always wear your eclipse glasses, except during your local totality, in order to protect our eyes and maintain our vision so we can see the next eclipse. Oh, okay, and one word of wisdom. Everybody asks about what can I do with my cell phone to observe the sun. I will say this, in the run up to totality and after, you can take those eclipse glasses that we're handing out here today and put them over the camera of your phone, and then you can get some nice pictures as you're coming into totality and as you're exiting out of the partial eclipse. But don't try to use your phone to capture the corona during totality, because your cell phone is not going to be able to do a very good job at all. This is what I tried to do. In 2019, I saw that eclipse through Chile from the Atacama Desert, so that's where I am here. But, so that's the moon in front of the sun, but like I can't see anything of the shape of the corona. I was fumbling around with my phone so much that I really kind of missed some of the really cool parts of the totality experience. So I would say let's leave the eclipse imagery to our professional astronomers and try to memorize, remember, and get the experience with all of your senses and keep a mental memory. That would be my recommendation. Okay, now, I know I've been talking to you guys for about 30 minutes. Statistically, speakers lose their audience after about 20 minutes. So we're gonna just do a quick little, fun activity to kind of re-energize us. So I want us all to model an eclipse. I want you to put your arm out all the way at the end, put your thumb up, close one of your eyes, that's the Earth, view from Earth. Your thumb is the moon. Eclipse somebody on the other side of the room. They're not gonna know who you're eclipsing. I found my parents here, I got them. Yeah. Okay, so you can make an eclipse any day with your thumb and your finger. Very scientific experiment. Okay, now my expertise is solar magnetism. So I am going to talk a little bit about some of the magnetic features of our sun and maybe show you those types of simulations that I create for my research. So this is what our sun looks like today. I grabbed these images just before coming over here today. This is what the sun looks like if we were to go outside with our eclipse glasses and look up at the sun right now. We'd need to magnify it a little bit. This is a sunspot. That's a place where magnetism is coming out of the sun. Now, our human eyes can see things on the sun that are 1/30th of the sun's diameter or larger, if you've got pretty good vision. So when these spots get big enough, it is possible to see them with your naked eye if you're wearing your eclipse glasses. I tried yesterday and I couldn't see this one with my naked eye, but sometimes they do get big enough that you can. So don't throw away those eclipse glasses if you still want to keep them around in case we have a pretty big sunspot. You can take a look. This is a map of the magnetic field on the sun at the exact same time. And just like how bar magnets, they have a north and south pole. The Earth has a north and south pole. That's the direction of the magnetic field. So in those white regions, magnetic field is coming out of the board toward you. It arches over, and it goes back into the page in those dark regions. So every time you see a dark region next to a white region, you can imagine magnetic field is poking out of the sun, arching over, and going back in. So right here, I see that happening. I'm going to look at my sun in ultraviolet light. I've got a little magnetic loop happening here. So I've got right here 2 regions of light and dark next to each other. I can find regions of magnetic loops on there. So these are a couple of different ways that we can use to observe the sun. And these are all taken with the Space Telescope, the Solar Dynamics Observatory. And these images are, anybody can pull them down off the internet. These are not, proprietary or anything like that. So sunspots, again, are regions of intense magnetism on the sun's surface. those spots, they're about the size of Earth. Here are some sunspots in 2014. They're about the size of Earth. If we zoom in, this is what they look like. Remember our shadow, the umbra and penumbra? When we talk about a sunspot, the dark part of the sunspot we call the umbra. The ring around it we call the penumbra. Now imagine those magnetic loops poking on the edge of the sun. At the place where that loop attaches to the sun, you get one sunspot. It arches over, and where it attaches to the sun on the other place, on the other side, you have a second sunspot. So these spots usually occur in pairs, and they're at the bottom of these magnetic loops that appear on the sun. So magnetic fields suppress the flow of heat. They keep heat from flowing to that part of the sun. So that part of the sun is colder than the surroundings. The surface of the sun has a temperature of, let's say, 10,000 Fahrenheit. If any of you like Kelvin, 5,800 Kelvin. And in these sunspot regions, the temperature is about 1,000 to 2,000 degrees cooler. So that's why they look dark compared to the surroundings. Okay, this is the most intense plot I'm going to show you today. This is the most important plot for a solar physicist. It's called the solar butterfly diagram. Maybe you can imagine that this looks like the wings of a butterfly. So what we're seeing here on the bottom is time. Starting in 1880, going all the way up to 2020. Well, it goes a little bit further than that, to present day. And then on the bottom, we've got that time axis. Now, this is plotting the location on the sun where those spots appear. Right down the middle, this is the equator of the sun, just like how we have the equator of the Earth. Up here would be the north pole of the sun. Down here is the south pole of the sun. So let's pick out this right here. Probably about 1955, we start seeing spots. Each one of these little pixels represents spots on the sun. We start seeing sunspots appear like mid-latitudes, around 45 degrees above and below the equator. And then as we progress forward in time, those spots start to appear at lower and lower latitudes. They reach the equator, and then whoop, they appear at higher latitudes again. And they're doing this cyclically. There's a periodicity. There's a period of time over which this seems to happen. Now, if I look at this, so that's where the spots appear on the sun. This graph shows us how much of the sun is covered by these spots. So let me pick out the same little cycle here. In about 1955, well, this is sunspot area. No spots, 50% of the sun covered by spots. So in 1955, we had almost no spots. About 5 years later, we had almost 50% of the sun covered with spots. And then about 5 years later, again, no spots. This happens on a regular time period of about 11 years. We call that the solar cycle or the sunspot cycle. And it's really important for us to better understand the sun's magnetism so we can track these sunspot cycles. And the reason why is because of this plot here. Similar idea. I've got the year, this is 1970 to 2005. The blue is the number of spots we see on the sun. So that's that blue path, or that blue graph. And in red is the number of orbiting satellites around the Earth that plummet back to the Earth during that time period. Oh, they match. That should be scary for you if you're a satellite operator. And so as solar physicists, one of the things we do is try to help predict what the sun is going to do so that we can alert anybody who cares about putting satellites up into space. And so the reason why those spacecraft plummet, when there's more spots on the sun has more magnetic activity. The sun can spit off some of those magnetic loops through the solar system. Sometimes they hit the Earth and they impact us, and they impact the orbiting spacecraft. But also what happens, let's look at this image here, is that there's an increase in the X-ray radiation that's emitted from the sun when there's more spots. An increase in X-ray radiation heats the upper atmosphere of Earth, and that puffs up its upper atmosphere. So the upper atmosphere gets higher above the Earth than it usually does. And we've got satellites that are orbiting where previously they were orbiting, they weren't experiencing much of the atmosphere. Now the atmosphere is puffed up, and they're experiencing greater atmospheric drag from all the particles in the atmosphere. So that's going to cause those spacecraft to move through a more dense part of the atmosphere that they're not expecting to encounter, and that can slow them down, and that can cause them to deorbit and plummet back toward the Earth. So that's what's happening there. There's a couple of different things. There's the magnetism of the sun impacting us directly by slamming into those satellites, and also because you're puffing up the Earth's atmosphere with increased X-ray radiation. So we as solar physicists have a job to do to help better predict and understand that. And that's part of the research that I do. Now, just to tell you here, in February of 2022, SpaceX launched a whole bunch of satellites. They're Starlink satellites that are meant to be providing communication, internet all over the globe. And they lost 40 of them due to a solar storm. A solar storm is what we call the event when loops of magnetism break off from the surface of the sun. Those impacted the Earth, and then they caused those satellites to plummet, to deorbit. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is a telescope image taken from a telescope in Cerro Tuolo, which is a place in South America, a big telescope. And all of those streaks in the sky, those are Starlink satellites. Those are satellites that are streaking through our telescopic observations, and they are preventing us from being able to see the stars. We can't do anything to remove these. So that's just something, I guess, that we have to deal with, but that's an impact. Got to give and take with all these satellites that we're launching into Earth orbit. The more we launch, the more they're going to impact our astronomical observations if we're doing observations from the ground. Okay, now I'm going to show you the simulations that I do, just so you guys can see. This is called magnetohydrodynamics, where you take the equations of magnetism, combine them with the equations of fluid motions, and they move. So magnetism, hydro, fluids. We assume that the interior of the sun is a gas, and it's moving. So this gray sphere, that's the inner 2/3 of the sun. Surrounding it, we have the upper third of the sun. And this green rope right here, that's a rope of magnetism. So imagine you have this huge magnetic rope, magnetic rubber band, and it's being impacted by surrounding fluid, hot hydrogen and helium swirling around in the sun. In these blue regions, those are regions of strong downdrafts, downflows, that are punching some of these magnetic loops back to the bottom of the sun. These red regions, those are regions of strong updrafts that are helping to lift some of these loops of magnetism toward the surface. So if my simulation were to go further, where that magnetic loop popped up, we could assume that it would continue on through the sun's surface to create a sunspot. So we try to perform these simulations to understand what's going on inside the sun, because our telescopes cannot see what's going on inside the sun. The best we can do is apply our equations of physics, our computational methods, and make connections between what our simulations tell us and what we can observe on the sun's surface. So if you want to learn more about that stuff, well, you can come see me tomorrow at 4. Okay, so this is where I'm going to end with us today. I want to talk a few minutes about how the eclipse is a collective experience for all of us. I think if you haven't seen or been in an eclipse before, it's kind of an emotional feeling when you're surrounded by everybody around you looking at this beautiful astronomical event. So in astronomy, we talk about how there are many ways of knowing. There are many ways to understand the universe, and it comes from your personal beliefs and your cultural upbringing and understandings. Eclipses belong to all of us. Every culture, every peoples, every age has had a link to the eclipse. And so I'm going to talk about a few ways that other cultures throughout time and location have observed or thought about the eclipse. And I was thinking a lot about this one this morning, and I was watching some videos to prepare for coming here today, and it was like really emotional experience. But the Navajo people, or the Dene, when an eclipse begins, they don't look at it. They go inside their dwellings, and the eclipse is a time for them to sit and reflect and ponder Father, Son, and think about their link to the cosmos. So for them, when an eclipse happens, it is an event of death. It is the death of the sun. So they are mourning the sun. And then which is why, in particular, why they stay inside to contemplate. And then, after the eclipse, the sun is reborn. And there's an intimate interplay relationship between the sun and the moon, and then we create a rebirth. So the eclipse for them is about a celebration of death and rebirth. And it's really beautiful to watch them talk about that tradition. I don't know if you can, some of you may be able to get this QR code. It's kind of hard to see in the back. But if you go to that QR code, I can show it to you later too if you want to come up. There are links to some videos about Dene people talking about their eclipse experiences. Mayans. When an eclipse happens, they imagine that the sun is being eaten. And they're not alone. There are many cultures that, the sun is eaten by a dragon or by a wolf or by a frog. But for them, during the eclipse, they observe that the earth becomes completely dark and kitchen utensils and dishes will start eating people. We're linked to, I guess, the idea of eating of the sun. And so in order to scare away these utensils, they make noises to scare them away. But that's one way of knowing about eclipses and celebrating it. And this idea of the sun being eaten during a solar eclipse is not unique to the Mayans. In fact, Aboriginal people in Australia, also other parts of South America. And the Mapuche people, when they witness the solar eclipse, they imagine that the sun is being attacked by cosmic monsters, and they try to fight the monsters away with different ceremonies. And whenever the sun comes back again, they celebrate it. So this is also an idea of kind of rebirth and imagining the sun going away and coming back again. So there are many different ways to imagine your eclipse experience. And so what I want you guys to think about is, well, perhaps you could record your eclipse experience in the form of a poem. So there's this project called the Eclipse Poetry for Science Project, where it's inviting people all across the path of the United States eclipse to write down their experiences of the eclipse in the form of a poem or a drawing or a piece of art, and then to upload your card to a website. All of these locations here, I pulled this down a couple of days ago, all of those orange dots are places in the United States where someone has submitted their eclipse poetry, and they're recording their thoughts, frustrations, elations regarding their eclipse experience. So I do have some of those cards here, and we'll pass them out, and I encourage you to think about how you could encapsulate your thoughts and feelings about the eclipse. And this is the one that I made in preparation for our eclipse event here. I want to witness the cosmic coincidence, the order and organization, a unique era of our alignment, a crown of invisible forces made apparent for no one in particular, yet collectively breathed in and out. For me, this eclipse is about our collective experiences, the fact that I'm interested in observing this arches of magnetism above the sun, the fact that solar eclipses are unique in our era. The moon is moving away from the earth at a little bit more than 3 centimeters a year. So in about 600 million years from now, the moon will be too far away for us to have perfect solar eclipses. So we are living in a unique time where we get to experience this. And I would love to see some artwork. I drew some artwork here. I want to see the chromosphere, or some thoughts, your emotions before, during, after Eclipse Day for Evansville. I'm having my students down here in Mississippi do this for their eclipse observing experience too. And whenever you submit with the QR code, it goes into a gallery. These are some that have already been submitted so we can see what other people have done. And just one more reminder, public service announcement, that whenever you see the eclipse tomorrow, arrive to your location early, stay put, and then leave late because there's going to be a lot of traffic on the road, and we want to be sure everybody stays safe. So, thank you for listening, and I would love to take your questions. I hope I gave you a lot to think about, ponder, new information today. And I'll just put this up here so that you've got the times of totality. Take any and all questions about the eclipse, about the sun.
So when you talk about tubes of magnetism within the sun, is that just like, paths or regions of like high curl in the magnetic field, or is there like some additional properties there, like, in terms of the motion of gases or of,
Yeah, so the simulation that I showed earlier, we're, in particular in that one, we're adopting a way of representing magnetism called a flex tube. And so the idea is that these are regions of high magnetic flex, which is a magnetic field per unit area. And on the sun, when we observe the sun in the form of sunspots and we look at ultraviolet light and see those magnetic loops, it kind of gives us this idea that this magnetism are formed in ropes or loops. And so we're imagining these sort of bands or ropes of magnetism. And yes, we do know that those magnetic fields are curling. They're wrapping around a central axis. And the simulations that I showed here, we're not taking that into account, but that is important. So we call it writhe. The property of the tube writhe is how kinked up your rope is on its own, and then twist is how much is it twisted around the axis. And all of those things are important. So you could also, in your simulation, look for regions that had intense curl, intense twist, let's say, and then could define that as a flex region.
Is that flux perpendicular to the tube, or is it normal to the tube?
It's
Like along the axis?
well, you can imagine it's spiraling along a central axis. Yeah.
Or a couple in here.
Well, first of all, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. I have a question for you about the low Earth orbiting satellites or Starlink. So they must engineer for solar flares, right? And
Well,
that must have been a real surprise to them to lose 40 satellites, like kind of instantaneously.
yeah. So the thing is that we can kind of sort of predict that 11-year cycle of magnetism and kind of sort of tell you when there's going to be lots of spots and not. And during the time period where there's a lot of spots, you can expect more of these magnetic storms. But we have yet to be able to actually predict when those storms will happen well. So when those Starlink satellites were launched, actually it was launched during a time period where we were in a solar minimum, essentially. We weren't having a whole lot of magnetic activity, but then the sun does what it does, and sometimes it will just spit out a magnetic storm that you weren't expecting, and I do believe that's what happened to them. They weren't expecting a solar, it was what we call a coronal mass ejection, an ejection of mass from the corona is what it literally is. And they weren't expecting that to happen. So it happened like maybe a couple of hours before they launched, and then it takes a little while to reach the Earth. But they were caught by surprise on that one, let's say. And that does happen. We can't always predict when these things will happen. Tomorrow, the sun might, I don't want to be like doomsday, but just let you know, the sun could do this at any time. And we try to, there are always people monitoring the sun. People all over the world are monitoring the sun so that we can know as soon as possible when these events happen. But it also takes 8 minutes for light from the sun to get to us. So if something happens on the sun and we learn about it, it already happened 8 minutes ago. So that's also another problem.
Thank you again for the great presentation. So having never seen an eclipse before, I just wanted to know the diamond ring effect. Is it visible through the glasses, or is it small? Will you see it and know at that time after you can take your glasses off, or what's the differential point where you know it's safe? And then also, how can you observe that diamond ring effect as the last, let's say, seconds before you can take it off?
Yeah, so the diamond ring effect, you are meant to keep your eclipse glasses on to see it because it is still a flood of light coming from the sun to our eyes yet. And you can see it through eclipse glasses, yes. It's a little bit harder to see them through eclipse glasses than if you didn't have them on, but you're meant to keep them on during that experience.
But is it a small area, or will it be like obvious?
You know, it'll just be a little tiny speck on the edge of the sun, and I myself have not seen it in the 2 eclipses that I've been to, but let's see how far back I have to go to bring up that image again. Okay, so it'll be like a little kind of bright light on the edge here. It's going to be about that size, actually, in comparison to the sun. And that happens at just a few seconds right before we have full-on totality. So if you're going to observe it, generally, we should keep our eclipse glasses on to observe it. And then if you see that diamond ring happen after that effect is over, then you can take off your eclipse glasses. No, not necessarily. This is just any kind of random eclipse, let's say. It might not necessarily be here. It depends on which direction the moon is crossing over on the sun. Which direction is it coming from and which direction is it exiting out? Now, if you go to that website here, part of that is a little visual, and you can press play, and it will show you the path of the moon, and it will show you what it's going to look like for you in your location. So you can take a look at that and see where is the last little part of the sun where the moon will be covering it over, and then you can get an idea for, is that at like 4 o'clock? Is that at 9 o'clock for your location? Nice. Let's just turn it off.
I don't know whose phone that was. There's one right here, Maria.
Okay.
In fact, I have a couple of questions. First, does the moon start its movement from the right side or the left side?
Oh,
Covering the sun.
I am sorry. I don't know. I would have to, I don't know. I didn't check myself. I would have to go to the QR code to check to see, is it moving from left to right or right to left for us? But if you...
Wouldn't it be always starting from one side because of the rotation, of the revolution?
Yes, it will always start from one side of the sun and go off to the other. Depending on the alignment for our particular event, let's say, oh, I don't have a good image to imagine. Okay, well, let's say we're looking, this is our sun on eclipse day before the eclipse happens. When the moon starts crossing over, maybe it starts crossing over here, we can expect for totality, it might kind of come off somewhere up here. Okay. If it's coming in from this region, we could expect that it might come off somewhere over on that side. And let me see, this actually helps us out a little bit. Yeah, maybe this is the better image to show you. This is what that eclipse looked like in 2017 as the moon was coming on the sun and as it was moving off. So you can see they're kind of in line. If the moon's coming in from this side, then it's going to exit on the other side. It's kind of take a diagonal path.
The other question is there a simple way to explain how to measure the thickness of the drag layer?
I don't know how that is calculated myself. So I'm going to say I don't know. I'm sure we could perform that calculation, but that is not my particular area of expertise, but I do understand the effect and impact that it has, but I don't know any more details about it than that.
Hello there. I liked your comments about it being a communal event to really enjoy for 3 or 4 minutes. Very special. The last one, I traveled hundreds of miles and joined a group of people in the middle of the Nebraska plains. And one of the knowledgeable people that joined us there laid out a white sheet. And he did it quietly, didn't tell us anything about it. And then during that special 3 or 4 minutes of the eclipse, when it was, while we were all observing all around us, we took a look at the white sheet and saw shadow bands moving. And I thought that was pretty special. So for this eclipse, I've traveled hundreds of miles to be with family, and we're going to lay out a white sheet. But there's several different theories of the shadow bands. Can you cover them just briefly and what other people might want to look at on a white sheet during the eclipse?
See. Oh, I turned this off. Okay, let's go back here. I didn't talk about that particularly, but yes, this event called Shadow Bands. For us in this location is going to happen right around 2 p.m. And yeah, you're going to need to look at something very white or the edge of a white building to see it. And what happens during that time is that you see faint waves of light moving across bright surfaces or lighter colored surfaces as we approach totality, as you're getting just a little bit, tiny little bit of the light coming around the edge of the sun. I myself, I've only seen 2 total solar eclipses that were perfect, but I didn't see, I myself didn't notice that, but I also wasn't looking for it, I guess. There's so much, I guess you can say there's so much to observe during the eclipse, and that's one of those things that you could capture.
More back here who's been waiting.
Thank you. So I had 2 questions. One is, in terms of watching the eclipse here in Evansville, I know you and others have said, the sky darkens or that you can look at the horizon and it's different. Are we better off to try to watch it from a yard or a more rural part or like Green River Road? I mean, are there more lights around other places or and my second question is on putting a filter for my phone camera, for putting the eclipse glasses in front of it. Will the phone then, it'll be that dark for the phone also, taking a picture?
Yeah, so the idea, okay, so let's answer the first question about as long as you've got a nice unobstructed view of the sun, it shouldn't matter whether you're in a backyard or on the edge of the road. I guess if you're worried about light pollution, that's all the street lights that will be coming on to obscure your view. It would be best to get to somewhere that there's not a whole lot of lights around. But I think where we will be here on campus, and I think most of the city, even though the street lights will come on, it will not impact our ability to be able to see the corona with our naked eye. Actually, I guess I will say that the last eclipse I went to was in the middle of the Atacama Desert, so there weren't any lights around, so I didn't have to worry about that. And then the other one was in a park in Oregon, so I didn't have those around. So I guess myself, I don't have a good experiential answer to that question. But maybe there are others who could help you out with that question. That's all that I can say there. And then the other question, can you say that again? Oh. If you put the eclipse glasses over your phone to take the image, it'll look like what it looks like with your eyes. So it'll do, if you're trying to record that partial eclipse experience, the phone will be seeing what your eyes see, through the eclipse glasses.
Let's have one more question then.
Yeah. So, Maria, this effect of the clouds partially dissipating when an eclipse occurs, do we know the mechanism of that? Is it just heat from the sun being blocked and change in pressure and like that?
Yes, it's just a change locally in the amount of radiation that's coming from the sun. It changes the thermodynamics of the path that shadow is taking on the Earth. Now, I will tell you guys that it's supposed to be warm tomorrow, like almost 80, I think. But during 75, okay. During the eclipse, though, the temperature will drop a lot. It could drop by, well, definitely 5 degrees, maybe even 10 degrees. So if you're somebody that gets chilly really easily like myself, I'm going to want to have a jacket nearby. Because every time I've seen an eclipse in the summertime, I've always had to put my jacket on as we approached totality.
All right, well, thank you, Maria. It's been a wonderful talk, and appreciate the questions. Just a reminder, if you view the eclipse from here on campus, we have eclipse glasses to give out. We have a couple of thousand available for visitors, so if you haven't had a chance to pick them up, you can get them from us tomorrow as well. So again, please join me in thanking Maria, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, and I will definitely be hanging out. We don't have dinner reservations until 6, so I'm happy to talk more if anybody has questions and wants to hang out. All right, yay.